Today I'm going to be talking about criminal justice reform for Dr. Yu's class. My name is Paul Estrada Cruz. I am a student at criminal justice. Um, so this presentation is meant to be able to provide an insight as to my belief in that we need criminal justice reform. The first topic and the first reason as to why I believe in the criminal justice reform. One of the obvious reasons, the overcrowding of the prison populations. And as you look at Kansas as to its current prison population and where things are, Kansas, for the entire state of Kansas, according to the Department of Corrections, Kansas population has reached basically near capacity. Its projections was projected that for 2018 we were going to be at 10,321 with a capacity being 10,490 inmates for the state of Kansas. When you start to look at the big picture here, it's a tall tale about where we're headed. And I think as a society and as a community, we need to understand that we can't arrest ourselves out of a community problem. And we need to start looking at different solutions to how we respond and handle these situations amongst our community. As for Sedgwick County, currently, there's an average of 1,500 prisoners that come in that are housed in the Sedgwick County Jail per day. There's on average between anywhere from 70 to 80 that are booked per day into the Sedgwick County Jail. Now, I know that the Sedgwick County Jail also has an annex building, which is located on the south side of Wichita, which then houses another 1,000 inmates. So you can start looking at the numbers of what that looks like. Not to mention the cost of how much that's going to cost our community and the taxpayers per prisoners. I know that as of February 2019, in a recent article by Cake News, in an interview with the sheriff, local sheriff Jeff Easter, he mentioned that currently, as of February, which was last month, the jail has overcapacity of 250 inmates, which is a real problem. And as you dig deeper into what is the issue with this, with these numbers, you'll start to see, and I'll discuss this further, but you'll start to see how the biggest problem here is a lot of these inmates have substance abuse issues. Also in a recent article, there was the state of emergency declared by the governor herself in regards to the crisis in the El Dorado prisons and the prisons in general. So we're seeing the symptoms of the issues of this old, archaic criminal justice system that we have, in which it's evident that people that go to jail simply is not going to be the solution. You continuously arrest the same individuals, and the area that I was responsible for was in patrolling. I would run into the same individuals over and over and over, especially those that had drug addictions. And what wasn't getting addressed was the substance abuse. So that is the focus that I wanted to highlight in regards to prisons. I also quickly want to just touch on the racial disparities. Research has shown us that the number of inmates that are represented are far more higher numbers in regards to minority community members, not only at work but also just amongst the community members, and also just in a personal experience. So currently for the city of Wichita, they have a Class A misdemeanor city code 5 1.26.050A. Currently, you are faced for possession of marijuana. You are going to be facing a fine of up to $2,500 and up to 12 months in jail. What is very interesting to me is how you will face similar penalties, and actually the exact same penalty for those that are driving on suspended, and specifically those that are driving on suspended if they get caught a second time. So for your second offense in the city of Wichita, if you are driving with a suspended license and this is your second offense, you're looking at a fine of up to $2,500 and 12 months in jail. Now, why is it significant? This is significant because there has been more than one occasion where I have run across people that are driving with a suspended license, and are people that have no criminal record, that have no criminal history whatsoever, and are simply trying to make a living and go to work. And it's no secret that the transportation system in the city of Wichita is horrible, and it's unreliable, and people have to drive in order to get to work. The reason their license was suspended in certain circumstances was due to the inability to pay for the citation, whether because of financial reasons, health reasons, you name it. They weren't able to respond with a citation within 10 days. If you don't respond with a citation in 10 days, you can get your driver's license suspended. So the burden that puts on the community is tremendous, and it's equivalent to that of a possession of a drug charge. It gives a clear imbalance in the penalties. And not to mention, when you start discussing the issue of migrant communities, so for your undocumented communities, you have the issue of where people have no way of being able to obtain a driver's license, and B, if they at one point were able to obtain a driver's license in the state that provides driver's license to undocumented community members, if they come to the state of Kansas, they will not be able to renew that driver's license. And for the Kansas Department of Revenue, their policy is that if you drive without a driver's license, or if you drive with a license with an expired license and don't get it renewed, after several citations or encounters where you are given the citation, your license will automatically be suspended, which causes a tremendous amount of burden and problems of sending people to jail that shouldn't be in jail. Drugs. Another category of why I think we need a criminal justice reform is just simply the issue with drugs. Currently, the snapshot for our city is that drugs is basically what's driving specifically aggravated assaults and burglary property crimes in the city of Wichita. In a recent interview with the Deputy Chief Jose Salcedo with the Wichita Police Department, he discussed how methamphetamines is the drug that is creating a lot of the problems for the community as it relates to crimes. And, in a recent interview with Sheriff Easter, he also discussed that 73% of inmates in the Sedgwick County Jail deal with substance abuse. The city of Wichita reported that there has been over $500,000 in damages in city-owned properties where criminals are coming in and stealing the copper wire. 68% of prisoners that are released were arrested within 3 years. 79% were arrested within 6 years, and 83% were arrested within 9 years. And this is according to statistics from a study that was done over a 9-year period by the Department of Justice. And not to mention the cycle of mental illness between the law enforcement community, the medical community, and the local jails. Just my own personal experience in working in this field, and those officers respond and really their hands are tied. So the only option is to refer them to the medical community. A lot of times EMS will get called and will transport them to the local hospital, like St. Joseph, who's also has a ward built in within the hospital. And then eventually, that person is having a mental crisis along with being under the influence of some sort of drugs. After the drugs wear out, the medical community or the hospitals will then release the individuals. They have nowhere to go. They're homeless, and they want to get their next high. And they start coming off their high, which then creates a psychosis. Eventually, this individual will do something that will commit a crime, whether it's trespassing or a battery of a person or security guard at the hospital, and then eventually that person will end up back in jail. And it's a vicious cycle. And we're not addressing the real issue, which is addiction and mental health. I think when it comes to mental health, we need to do something more. Recently, there was a facility that is parallel to CompCare where people that are suffering from substance abuse can go there, where they can wear off the high, where if they are under the influence of alcohol or drugs, they can go there. They'll be supervised, and then they'll be offered substance abuse programs. However, this just started a few years ago, and then routinely the only two places was St. Joseph Hospital and CompCare, and that in no way is really addressing the issue. Because when it comes to law enforcement, they're normally the ones that respond to these types of situations, and their response is to train to refer to the medical facilities, but really there's only so much you can do. So a lot of this responsibility falls on law enforcement, and eventually those individuals end up in jail, and they do not belong in jail. People with mental illness should not be in jail, and that is why I firmly believe in criminal justice reform. To wrap it up, as I was doing research, consideration in a recent study, 2017, there's a study of first-time offenders who were referred to mental health providers, and they basically noticed that in regards to recidivism rates were actually lower, and they lasted longer periods of time, which I think should be applied to the juvenile offenders in regards to the reform, not only for criminal justice, but also the criminal justice for young offenders, which is why we need more programs such as Real Men, Real Heroes, Boys and Girls Club, and different organizations. And another recent article that I read, the Wichita Police Department had been partnering up with the YMCA, and that they had an after-school program where they were offering kids just a place to go, a safe place where they weren't being influenced by gangs, they weren't being influenced by drugs, they weren't being offered drugs, and it was in a supervised environment where they can play, they can stay up late, up until curfew, and law enforcement were present to where they can interact with law enforcement officers. And lastly, I want to wrap up with this. Growing up, in California and Inglewood during the 1990s, which was when the riots were happening, I remember living in a disorganized neighborhood. My daily walk in elementary and middle school, my daily walk consisted of knowing the paths, what to take, because you were either going to be confronted by a gang member, you were going to be confronted and offered drugs, or you had the chance of observing or being a witness to a crime or being a victim of a crime. So I firmly believe that disorganized neighborhoods do have a play and an influence in a juvenile's life, especially if the parent's efficiency is not one that shows love and care and support for their children. And as we learned through this semester, there's going to be an increase in the chances of a juvenile to end up in prison. I think there needs to be a drastic change. We need to have more programs. We need to have more mental health programs. We need to have more resources provided for our youth. There needs to be a complete change in the criminal justice reform. We're not going to arrest ourselves out of this community problems, and we really need to take the initiatives. The last slides are just the references that I had that I talked about today. And this is my presentation and my beliefs as to why we need a criminal justice reform.